Welcome to another tutorial. My kids are back in school, so I have a little more time to do videos in a nice quiet home. I want to show you how I use Photoshop to help prepare for painting. So in this image I had a couple pictures actually of these bright orange poppies that I wanted to do a painting of. However, I didn't like any of the images I had. This is the main image I was using. You can see how I just hid that layer. And then I had a second image where this poppy was kind of in the background at an angle. So I wanted to incorporate these two images together. So I photoshopped them together in one composition. What I'm doing to start when I do these images, for example, this is a very large painting. I'm doing it on a 30-inch by 40-inch canvas. So when I made the canvas size, I wanted to make sure it was the same ratio. So if you go to Photoshop, File, New, you can go to the width and the height. So for the width, for example, 30 inches by 40 inches, I could say 40 by 30, but that's going to be a huge document. So I just cut it in half and said 20 by 15 and hit create. So once I had this canvas, I could then drag and place my image into here. So that's what I did in this particular painting. So I dragged this image and then I also dragged this secondary image. So this was the original image cropped according to what I thought I liked. And then the key thing here is you'll notice that the center of this poppy is kind of in this lower third. That's just a ratio that people use in art. I thought it looked nice there. And then this image here, you'll notice I have this little thing called a layer mask. What this is it actually masks off part of the image. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this original image in so you can see what this looks like. You can see how that actually works. All right, so I'm starting this over again. I'm actually gonna hide this layer, just pretend it's not there. This is how I went about doing this when I started. So like I said, I had this image here. I didn't like that you couldn't see the center of that one very well. So that's why I decided to combine this image with this one. So what I'm doing is I have this image placed into Photoshop, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a layer mask. So the layer mask is actually this little guy right here, this rectangle with a hole in the middle. And you see how it's this little thumbnail that shows up on the side. The key thing to remember is black means block. So if I take a brush and I want just a standard basic brush, you can see how this has a soft edge or I could do a hard edge. I'm going to go ahead and do a soft edge. This is really tiny, so I'm going to make this bigger. So black means block. So I want to block off. If you want, you can hide the layer, this bottom layer, your background image, just to help see better. I'm going to block off because all I want in this picture is this corner flower here. And I'm going to go ahead and block some of this here. If you want to change the brush and make it more of a hard edge, you can just click that. And there's also some shortcut keys. I'm hitting Control Alt or Control Option. And if you go hold up or down, it makes it smoother. If you go left or right, it makes it bigger or smaller. So that's just a shortcut key you can use for that. So once again, the key thing to remember is black means block. If you're not used to doing that brush size here, just adjust the size and hardness over here because it's a little easier. If you haven't used Photoshop too much, go ahead and just play with your brush size there. I'm gonna go ahead, fill this in. I'm actually gonna go ahead and make this nice and big just so I can quickly, I can quickly block that off. So the key thing is I am just trying to mock this up so that it looks like what I want to happen on my original image. Okay, or on my actual painting. So I'm gonna go ahead and play with this image here. I can move it around. I can even hit Command T and tilt it. What's nice is that layer mask will move with your image. So this layer mask, whatever you clipped off of it, will shift with how you do that layer. You can see how I have a little bit here. Make sure you're on the thumbnail there. Hit your brush and I can cut that off. So once again, you can see how I'm using this to kind of compose how I want this image to look. A lot of times you'll have a photograph that you don't like where something ended up, so you can play with it, play with the composition before you do the painting itself. I'm gonna go ahead and hide this layer and this is the one I spent some more time on so you can see that. All right, now I did some extra stuff to this. I actually deleted some of the pixels first and then used the masking effect, but you get the idea. Now I had some other things here. These are called adjustment layers. And what I did for this is I really wanted to practice in this image. I wanted to practice doing an underpainting. So I'll drop in here where you can see what that underpainting looked like. It started out really sketchy. The key point of this underpainting was to capture the highlights and the shadows. The last painting I made, I spent so much time repainting it because I just hadn't captured them well. And an artist friend of mine had been playing with this underpainting technique, so I thought I'd give it a try. So there's the original beginning of the underpainting. Here you can see the underpainting a little more developed. This is what it looked like before I started layering on my orange. So if you go back to my Photoshop image here, you can see how I have this levels layer and this black and white layer. These are called adjustment layers. And I'm going to scooch this up so you can actually see. I have my window minimized a little bit. If you click on this little half circle thing here, you can see all these different adjustment layers. What I did on this is I did, like I said, levels, and then I also did this black and white option. So I'll go ahead and click on this levels so you can see what it looks like. Like I said, this is hidden right now, the one that I did, but I want to show you this in action. So what levels are your ranges of lights to darks? I use levels a lot in Lightroom when I'm editing photos, but right now you can see this is like a little bar graph of how many light values there are, how many gray tones there are, and how many dark values there are. What I did is I dragged this over so that there were more highlights. I wanted to really emphasize those highlights. And I just played with this levels until I got just a really high contrast image. Once again, just to help me emphasize where the highlights in my image were and where the lowlights of my image were. The next thing I did was add this black and white filter. I did not do anything to it. If you click on this little spot here, you get the adjustments back. I did not play with any of these, but this black and white helped me when I was doing the underpainting so I could see where were those tones. Once again, that just helped me focus on the light values and the dark values. I'm gonna go ahead and delete these ones that I just added because they're, delete this one that I just added. Just hit the trash can because I don't need that anymore. And then once again, just show you. So here it is with the levels and the black and white. The levels help me focus on those highlights, and then the black and white, same thing. I really wanted to focus on the lights and darks before I did color. So once I was done with the black and white part, I went ahead, turned those two levels off, and stuck with the color. Something you might notice are these little grid lines. What I do when I begin a painting, and you can see it very vividly in this frog peony painting, this is a lot more complex, so I took more time to make more grid lines, but I make a grid to help me figure out that composition that I determined. This just helps me figure out, okay, where does this petal line up with this bulb and this bud? And it helps me just lay the painting out from a proportion standpoint before I start laying down any of the colors. So these grid lines, and I'll go ahead, if you go up to the top, you can hit View, Clear Guides. So that's how you clear them. So let's pretend we didn't have any guides to start with. You can see my document is 16 inches wide. Half of 16 is 8. Half of, this is 12 inches high, so half of 12 is 6. And then just drag these over. So all I'm doing is holding down with my mouse on the ruler. I'm putting one at a 4 because that's another midsection. Another one here at 12, another one here at 3, and as you can see, just making this little grid. This just helps you keep track of where you're going. If you don't have rulers, this is going to be in that same view. You can see rulers is checked versus unchecked. I usually keep rulers open because they're helpful for a lot of things. I obviously don't have very many grid lines on this particular image. This wasn't as complex as some of the other things I was doing, so I felt like this was enough. I really wanted to get the motion of these petals, and I should note that I use this as a starting point, but as I paint, I shift things around. So if you were to overlay this tonal image on top of it, you can see how it doesn't quite perfectly match up. It's a little bit different. I use this as a reference point, and then I have my artistic freedom, obviously, to play with the image from there. Some other things that I do to help me with painting are filter effects. So for example, in this particular photograph, I'm planning on turning this into a painting later, and this has a little more stuff done to it. actually don't have the original image saved in here, but if you look right now, you can see how this looks painted. So if you go to Filter and you go to Filter Gallery, so pretend this was an unedited image. I don't have that version in here anymore. You can see how these different effects do different things to the painting. So this is cutout, this is dry brush, this is poster edges, and then the most popular one for artists is paint daubs because it makes it look like a paint daub. Now I already did that to the photo layer, which is why it already looks like a paint daub. I'm gonna go ahead and hide that. What I did is I took that image, it's hiding in the background here, I put that in my Photoshop file, and then I layered this textured paper. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. If you go to File, Place Embedded, so on my desktop I have some just different digital scrapbooking papers. So I'll go to Papers. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick one of these textured papers and hit Place. And make it a little bit bigger so it fills the space. And then what I'm going to do, if you look at this layer 6, do you see how it's set to overlay? And this is another post I have on my blog. So if I take this and I set it to overlay, you can see how this is exposing this paper onto this digital textured paper onto my photographed image. All that's doing is just giving me some more texture to the image so that when I go and do this painting, you'll notice this paper has some warm tones to it. I wanted to warm up the image and I wanted it to have more of a textural feel. Now I use this for a cover, as you can see. I'm going to go ahead and hide these text effects, but you can see how I use these filter effects and this overlay just to kind of play out how do I want the colors to look, how do I want the texture to look. I want this to be a little looser than some of my typical paintings. Like I said, this is something I'm going to try in the future. If you go to my blog, my Botanical Amy blog, you'll see this in a lot more depth if you're not used to layering a paper on top, placing files in Photoshop. If you're not used to those filter effects, I explain that better in there. The key things I wanted to cover today were what are some different ways you can use Photoshop in order to help you with your paintings. And the key thing is helping you visualize it. How do you want the layout to look? Play with some of your levels. Pay attention to those highlights. Black and white filter is something I use all the time when I'm doing a painting. It's really easy to get distracted by color. So if you use that black and white adjustment layer, once again, this little half circle, that's just something that you can do to help you visualize what it's going to look like in black and white. And once again, the levels, you can play with those and tweak those to do the same thing. Photoshop is a great tool to play with compositions, to play with lighting, to give you an idea and kind of mock up what you're looking for, what you're visualizing in your painting. Sometimes it's easier to digitally play with something before you spend a lot of time with your paint. Your painting's still going to take quite a few hours, but it can still help you kind of do some of the planning in a more user-friendly way. Go ahead and feel free to check out my Etsy shop and keep watching my channel for more tutorials.